It's time for Orchard Skills. The code flow is the most advanced and secure flow in OAuth OpenID Connect. It is also the most flexible, that allows a web client to obtain tokens securely. It is split into two major parts: the authorization flow, where the client redirects to the server, and the server redirects back to the client after the authorization process, and the token flow, which is a REST API call from the client to the authorization token endpoint on the server. Today on Orchard Skills, we'll be continuing to utilize the OpenID Connect code flow authorization in Orchard Core. Again, we will use this flow to obtain secure access to the Orchard Core content APIs. In a previous video, we created an Angular client. This time, we'll be creating a Vue.js client application with CRUD operations. Create, update, read, and delete our custom-defined subscriber content type in the Orchard Core content management system. Please stay with us, and we'll get started. Welcome back. As you can see, by just describing our objective, OAuth OpenID Connect can be a bit intimidating, but by learning the basic terminology and seeing some examples, you can eventually master it. In order to utilize the OpenID Connect server, we'll need to configure it in Orchard Core. I believe the fastest way to accomplish this task is through a recipe. Let's take advantage of the material design theme solution we created in a previous video. With your favorite browser, let's go to github.com/orchardskills/orchardskills.orchardcore.materialDesignTheme. Click on the code button, and let's go ahead and select Open with GitHub Desktop, and also the button Open GitHub Desktop.exe, and let's hit the clone button. Okay, great. Let's bring up Visual Studio. Okay, let's head over to the material design recipe here. So the first thing we want to add is the GraphQL feature. And next, what we'll want to add is enable the OpenID server, OpenID management, and OpenID verification features. And now let's head down to the end of the file here. And here we want to add the configuration for the OpenID Connect. Add that here. So we want to specify OpenID server settings and test mode enable false, access token format, JSON web token. Authority is the location of our server, which is localhost 44307. Enable token endpoint true, enable authorization endpoint true, enable logout endpoint true, enable user info endpoint true, allow password flow false, allow client credential flow false, allow authorization code flow true, allow refresh token flow false, allow implicit flow false, allow logout endpoint true, and then we'll specify our authorization endpoint path to be our server/connect/authorize, and our logout endpoint path as our local host connect/logout, and our token endpoint path as connect/token, our user info endpoint path as /connect/user info. And then we want to set up our authorization code flow, and we'll name it OpenID application. Client ID will say code flow client ID. Redirect URLs will be localhost 4200 sign in -callback. And that's for the Angular application. And also for the post logout redirect, we want to specify localhost 4200, sign out callback, and then we want to allow authorization code flow to true, allow logout endpoint to true, and then type public. And then for our scope, which is OpenID scope, put our description, a scope to provide API for remote clients, display name, API scope name, API resources, my recipient, and then down here, name, OpenID validation settings, audience, my recipient, and then the authority is our server, localhost 44307. And that's it. That's all you have to do to configure your OpenID Connect settings in Orchard Core. Let's go ahead and bring up a command prompt. And let's go ahead and go to the orchardskills.orchardcore.material design directory where we cloned the repository. The first thing we want to do is install Vue. And so let's go ahead and do that. And let's issue the command npm install -g for global at vue/cli. Okay, now let's go ahead and issue the command vue create. And let's create an application called vuex-oidc. So let's go ahead and hit enter. Okay, so we'll go ahead and use Vue 3. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and go to the directory vuex-oidc. Do a directory, and there's our files. Okay, the first thing we want to do is to install the OIDC client. So let's go ahead and issue an npm install oidc-client-save. And this is the OpenID Connect library that's in JavaScript. All right, let's next install Axios, which is for a REST API library. So we'll do an npm install Axios-save. All right, great. Okay, let's go ahead and install FontAwesome. So we'll do an npm install at FontAwesome/vue-FontAwesome version 3. Okay, and for our toast notifications, let's go ahead and install the Vue toast notification package. So we'll do an npm install Vue toast notifications, save. Okay, great. Now let's go ahead and bring up Visual Studio Code, and let's go to our extensions, and let's go ahead and install Vtour. This is probably one of the most popular Visual Studio Code extensions for Vue. Okay, it's installed. Let's head on over to the material design for Bootstrap, and let's get their Bootstrap 5 material design kit for 2.0. So that's located at github.com/mdbbootstrap/mdb-ui-kit. Let's go ahead and clone that. Hit the clone button. Okay, great. Now let's bring up a file explorer here, and let's just go to the MDB-UI kit, and let's copy the CSS, JavaScript, and copy those. Let's go into our source directory and our assets, and let's just go ahead and paste that inside there. And so now we have our CSS and our JavaScript. Create an SSL directory. So let's go here, call it SSL. And inside here, let's go ahead and copy the SSL directory from our Angular. And let's go ahead and paste it here. All right, great. So in our source, let's go under components, and let's go ahead and just rename this to a home. Okay. And let's create 2 more components. So let's go ahead and add a OIDC sign in callback view, and also new file, and we'll call this one OIDC sign out callback.view. Okay. Create a config directory, and in our config directory, create a config.js file. Let's also create a services directory, and in there, let's create a file called Auth Service.js. Let's create another file for our routing. Let's call that router.js. Okay, let's go ahead and create a .env file for our environment development, and let's also create a .env.production. Let's also create a vue.config.js. Let's go through and implement each of these components. So let's start out by looking at the vue config.js. Here, what we want to do is enable SSL, and in order to do that, we need to load the SSL server.key and SSL server.cert. Next, let's go through the config.js. In here, we want to define our client root, which will be localhost 5002, our STS authority, which is our Orchard core server, which is localhost 44.342. We want to specify a client ID, which is CodeFlow client ID. And then our scope will be for the CodeFlow authorization will be OpenID, profile and API, and our response type will be code for CodeFlow. Let's go ahead and look at main.js. Here we'll go ahead and import create app for Vue, the router, the app and app.vue. We want to import our assets for the CSS and also the JavaScript for our JavaScript framework, which is material design for Bootstrap. We want to import our toast notifications and also import the CSS for our toast notifications. We want to import the Oidc authorization service. Then we also want to import Font Awesome. And down here is where we create our application. We do an app.use toast, app.use router, app.component would be font awesome, setting that up and do a mount. And then we do a property here. So we specify an instance property so that we can get access to the OpenID Connect library. And that would be a singleton. Next, let's go ahead and implement the Auth Service. Here we want to import the OpenID Connect client library and import the Babel polyfill for compatibility. And then we want to import all of the different configuration from the config settings. And we want to go ahead and instantiate and create an OIDC client. And then we set up the logger to console, the log level to info, do an add user load function and output the information to the console. Then we want to add access token expiring function. And these are all the different settings for the OIDC client library. Add access token expired event. And these are all events. And then add silent renew event, add user sign out event. Then we want to export the class security service for login. And then we do a is logged in to see if the user is logged in. Then we do and define a function called complete login. And we have logout. Then we have complete logout. Our last function would be a get access token. So let's go ahead and implement and talk about the OIDC sign in callback view. So here is the callback. When we log in, it gets redirected back to the server. And so we have an empty div. And then we basically define the component OIDC sign in callback. And then we do a toast notification saying that we're logged in. And we actually process the login through here where we go through the OIDC client and call complete login. And then we redirect path and go to the root URL. And then if there's any errors, then we do a toast notification and display the error message. And then the counterpart, which is the OIDC sign out callback, we also have an empty div here for the template, and we import the toast notifications, and then we do the view component for the route is OIDC sign out callback, and we set up the toast notifications. And then during the actual login process, we call the OIDC library complete logout, and then we do a route push to the root URL. And if there's any errors, then we do a toast notification to the user and display the error. We want to display a button on the navbar, which will say log in or log out, depending on what state. We have a method called sign in and sign out for when the button is pressed. We do a OIDC log in when we do a login, when the user pushes a button, and then we do an OIDC log out. And then once the page has been updated, then we go ahead and basically set the authorized users to its login state. Okay, let's go to the home component here. And this is where all of the CRUD operations are performed here. So here we're creating basically the structure, which is a table where we create our subscribers. So we have a container, then we do a v if the user is authenticated, then we go ahead and show the actual table. If not, then we ask the user to log in. Okay, so we come down here and we have an input field for the first name, input field for the last name, and an input field for the email. And then we have our buttons here to update the subscriber or to delete the subscriber, which is down here. And then we have a dialog here to add a new subscriber, which pops up. And down here we import Axios, which is the REST client library. and we import the STS authority, import the toast notifications. Go ahead and set up the API content and API GraphQL, and basically set up the JSON to do the query for content API. And so here we have a function for close edit subscriber, open edit subscriber, get a list of all the subscribers, a method to update subscriber, a method to delete the subscriber, and also a method to add a subscriber. And then we have a lifecycle hook here for mounted, and basically saying get access token from the OIDC client, the status from if the user is authenticated. Then the token is set to OIDC access token, and then basically call get subscribers. And that's it. And finally, we have our router.js. And so this basically configures and setups our routes. And of course, we have our base route, which is our home component. And then we have a sign-in-callback, which uses our OIDC sign-in callback component. And then we also have our sign-out-callback, which calls our OIDC sign-out callback. And then here where we create our route, and then we go ahead and export that. Let's go ahead and run our Orchard Core CMS web application, which is our server. And let's go up here and hit the green play triangle. All right, let's go ahead and enter our site. Let's select the material design theme. Let's go ahead and set a username, email, password, confirm our password, and then press the finish setup button. Now let's go ahead and log in here. And we'll use the same credentials and hit login. And let's go ahead and go to the dashboard, and let's go to security. And you can see here we have an OpenID Connect. Let's go to management applications, and you can see we have an authorization code flow. So let's edit that. And we have our client ID, which is our code flow client ID, our display name, which is our authorization code flow, our type, which is a public client, and then we have our flow is allow authorization code flow. And then we have our redirect URIs, which is localhost 5002 /signin-callback. And we also have our post logout redirect URIs, which is localhost 5002 signout-callback. And our consent type is explicit consent. Then if we go to our scopes, you can see here we have a scope here, which is an API scope. All right, let's go ahead and build our Vue.js client. Okay, let's do an npm install. And now let's do an npm run serve. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to localhost 5002. And there you go. You can see that our Vue client is working. So let's go ahead and log in. We'll click on the login button. And you notice we get redirected to the Orchard Core CMS server. So let's go ahead and enter our credentials in. And let's hit the login button. And you notice here we get an authorization screen. It says, do you want to grant authorization code flow access to your data? Scopes requested, OpenID, profile, and API. And let's go ahead and select yes. And then we get redirected, and now our Vue client is logged in. So let's go ahead and add a new subscriber. Let's add Donald Trump, and we'll say POTUS@us.gov. And we get our toast notifications. You have successfully added a new subscriber. Let's add another one. And let's add Joe Biden. And let's say joe@biden.com. So we added another subscriber. We get our toast notifications again. Let's add another one. Let's do Mike Pence. And he will be at mike@pence.com. And we get our toast notification. You have successfully added a new subscriber. Let's go ahead and add another one. Carmela Harris. And we'll do carmela@harris.com and add that. Okay, great. So now let's go ahead and let's edit this. And so call her Cami instead. Do an update. You notice that you've successfully updated your subscriber. So we did create and we did update. And of course we are reading, so we do all our reads here. And let's go ahead and delete Carmela. And so now Carmela is deleted. Okay, so let's head on over to the Orchard core and let's go ahead to subscriptions. And you notice that we have Mike Pence, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump in our subscription. So isn't that slick? So let's go ahead and let's delete Mike. And so we'll say, click on him, go to action, delete, and say okay. All right, now let's go back here and let's do a refresh. And you notice that Mike is gone. That's great. So now let's go ahead and log out. So if we hit the logout button, we get the logout screen at the server. So it says, are you sure you want to log out? So the server knows that we're logged out and we'll say yes. And now we're logged out and we don't have access to the CRUD operations anymore. Isn't that slick? Now to recap, we cloned the material design theme solution from a previous video, configured the server OpenID Connect for code flow authorization in the Orchard core CMS application, created a Vue.js client application using the OID client, and also configured it for client code flow authorization. Using the Vue.js client to log in, we were redirected to the server. We selected yes to confirm authorization to get access to the Orchard core APIs. Once logged in and authenticated, we were redirected back to the Vue.js client application. The Vue.js client application showed the authorized logged in status. We were able to perform CRUD operations, create, read, update, and delete on a custom content type subscriber. Now, if you missed or didn't understand something, that's okay. There's a detailed blog post that describes all the steps. There is also a GitHub repository with the complete source code. All this information is in the video description. If you like this video, please click on the thumbs up icon. Also, please subscribe and click on the bell icon to get a notification when I release the next video. Thank you for watching.